Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of our ongoing editorial webinar series, Coffee Talk. Each hour-long information-packed episode organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine features the observations and insights of an independent expert on a wide range of tech industry topics. Many thanks to the underwriting sponsor of this episode, Quest Software, protecting and empowering users and data, streamlining IT operations, and hardening cybersecurity from the inside out since 1987. Without their support, this series would not be possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief in the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator. Today's topic is Top Ransomware Lessons for IT Leaders. And our lead presenter is technologist, creator of compelling content, and senior resultant, Howard M. Cohen. But before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. This episode is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. We'll make some time during the talk for questions. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. Our sponsors provided some extra resources you absolutely will not want to miss. They're available now on your console. And as a small thank you to the first 200 attendees who stick with us to the end, we will be sending you a $5 certificate to Starbucks. It's a cup of joe to go with the info. Now let's presenter. Howard M. Cohen has spent more than 40 years in the IT industry. During that time, he has held senior executive positions in many of the top channel partner organizations, and he currently writes for and about IT and the IT channel. He's a sought-after speaker, an insightful observer of the technology landscape, and one of our very favorite presenters. You're in for a great session. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you, John K. Waters. This is Howard M. Cohen. Welcome you to today's presentation on ransomware lessons for IT leaders. Those of you who have been with me in prior presentations know that I always like to begin with a word of the day. It's very unusual, but today's word is based on an error message. And here's that error message. How many of you have gotten this error message, right? Problem exists between keyboard and share. Please replace user as soon as possible. Yes, problem exists between keyboard and share is actually the inspiration for today's word of the day, which is PEBCAC. Problem exists between keyboard and share. Now, some of you may have heard other incarnations of PEBCAC. There are many. There is, for example, the popular picnic. Problem in chair, not in computer. There is EBCAC, we forgot the P, error between keyboard and chair. There is PEBMAC, problem exists between monitor and share, for those of you who are more visual. Then there's the ID10T error, one of my favorites, indicating that the ID number 10T is, yeah, you get it. There's also the layer 8 issue. You're familiar with the ISO's 7-layer OSI's 7-layer ISO model. There's an 8th layer, and that 8th layer is the user layer. So there's that one. And then, there, of course, is the classic IBM, the idiot behind machine error. Obviously, what we're saying is that the problem is focused on users. And the problem users have is that all too often, because they are fallible, because they are human, they fall for phishing. They fall for phishing emails. What is a phishing email? Well, phishing is a form of social engineering. Social engineering is so prevalent, that of 2,200 incidents per day, over 90% use social engineering, more than 9 out of 10. So it is a predominant technique that people are using to break into other people's networks. Why? Because people, as I say, are fallible. They're unpredictable. They will not do the same thing the same way time after time after time because they have feelings about it. They may be in a bad mood. They may be distracted. Can't do that with digital devices, but you can do it with people. So when I say that they're falling for phishing, what am I talking about? Well, we know it's a form of social engineering. And in this form of social engineering, the user receives an email. Now, the email looks very genuine. It has the right typography. It has the right coloring. It reads like it comes from who it says it comes from. It may come from a vendor like Microsoft. It may come from your bank. It may come from your attorney. It may come from any one of a number of sources, a popular producer of consumer goods. It's possible that it comes from anybody. But the point is that it's not. It's fake. It's false. And it could come from your boss. It could look like it comes from within your organization and that your boss sent you an email message. Those are particularly insidious. In many cases, the email makes some offers to you. You can win a free vacation if you simply click here. You can have free gas for life if you click here. In any case, another form it takes actually is the Microsoft 365 login. Pops up, looks like it's asking you to log in, give it your ID and password, and maybe your multi-factor authentication number and whatnot, but it's not. It's not coming from Microsoft. It's coming from a cyber criminal. It invites you to either click on a link or open an attachment, and when you do, you open the gates of hell. You give the attacker free rein to corrupt, encrypt, or even outright steal your data. And once they've done with your data, they then start moving laterally around your network, attacking and wreaking havoc on everybody in your organization. This is bad stuff. And phishing emails always lead to ransomware. Now, when I say ransomware, what do I mean? I mean that a subset of malware in which the thief locks or encrypts your data and then lets you know, hey, I've locked or encrypted your data, and I'm not going to give it back until you pay me money. It's nasty. There are multiple types of ransomware. In some cases, Locker blocks your access to computers, and you can't get back into your own computers until the attacker unlocks you. In a crypto attack, they encrypt all or some of the files, and they won't let you get back at them until you pay for the encryption key. More recently, we've seen double extortion, where you make a payment for them to decrypt your files, and that's great. You've now got access to your data. You feel you're safe. And then they inform you that they're going to release your data to the public. Now, for all too many reasons, that may be something you just do not ever want to see happen. So you'll pay a second ransom for that, thus double extortion. We've also seen services pop up where you don't have to know how to commit ransomware. Someone will do it for you. All you have to do is pay them for use of their ransomware engine. How wonderful. So ransomware has become more and more prevalent. For those of you who have never encountered a ransomware notice, God bless you. Count yourself very fortunate. I envy you. Because let me tell you, ransomware messages are amongst the most frightening things you will ever in your life see. Here's one, telling you straight up, your documents or whatever are no longer available. We've copied them to our servers. We have them, but we've encrypted them on your server. And we've misspelled encrypted even. So you can't recover your files. Try as you will, you're not going to be able to unless you get the decryption process from us. Now, the good news comes, if there is anything like good news, the good news comes down at the bottom. They're telling you how much time you have left to pay, but they're only asking for $300. $300. It used to be that every ransomware demand was in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and then the ransomware thieves noticed that they weren't getting paid very often. So since they wanted to get paid, they really wanted some money, they lowered their expectations. They reduced the demands down to a reasonable and affordable sum. So you'll see many of these nuts come out asking you for very little money. Here's the dark encryptor. Now, does that look like an evil guy? The dark encryptor, he's only asking for $350, and you have 5 days to do it. Gosh, that's great. It's scary stuff. Here's more scary stuff. This is the Punisher, and the Punisher only wants $100, or is it $200? Here it is, $200. Yeah. What the heck? Get some bitcoins, pay him the $200, off you go. Seems like it's a very reasonable thing to do. And you've got about a day to do it. Let's examine, though, $100 here, $200 there, $300 somewhere else. Let's examine what the overall cost of ransomware really is. In 2023, the cost was $30 billion globally. $30 billion for ransomware. There's a new IBM report that says that an individual data breach now tops almost $4.5 million. Imagine paying $4.5 million for your own data you own, data you shouldn't have to pay for. And the average payment has increased, and this is actually back in 2022, to almost $1 million. So the costs are increasing, and they're tremendously high, and they're not getting lower. Fact is, ransomware is just getting higher and higher and higher. So this is a growing thing. They're making it easier and easier. So what is it they're after? When you ask yourself, what is a ransomware thief really after? And a lot of people will say, well, they're after my data. And of course, data is the new bacon. Everybody loves bacon. And everybody loves their data. And the only thing better than bacon is more bacon. Well, the only thing better than data is more data. But the fact is that most of the time, the cyber criminal could care less about your data. They don't really care about your data at all. You'd be wrong if you said they were after your data. The reality is they're after your money. In fact, more than 95% of breaches are money motivated. So how does the money flow out? Well, back in 2022, the average ransom payment was $812,000 per incident. Now we're up to $945,000. The average cost of a ransomware attack increased 13% to $5.13 million this year. So you can see it's creeping up and up and up. It also, you start to think about it, it takes almost a year for anybody to identify that they've been stricken with ransomware. Sorry about that. It takes almost a year. And it's reduced a bit when you get law enforcement involved, but now this is the big number. Over a third of ransomware attacks are never reported. Nobody knows they exist. So all of our statistics could be off by as much as a third. So you have to see all of these numbers in that context. We could be off by a third. In 2023, cybercrime hit $8 trillion. And we believe it's going to grow to $10.5 trillion. Now, this is all of cybercrime. But think about that. Cybercrime is costing the world $10.5 trillion by next year. Trillion. It's an awful lot of money wasted, burned. The prediction is that if it cost $20 billion in 2021, it's going to cost $265 billion, more than 10 times as much in the next 10 years. That's a lot. And by that time, we predict that you'll be seeing a ransomware attack every 2 seconds. An awful lot of attacks. There's an awful lot of people keeping themselves busy doing something that is only productive for them and destructive for everybody else. And so now, it seems that you only really have 3 choices when confronted with ransomware. One is pay the ransom. We know that about 2/3 of people who've paid the ransom got their data back. 19% didn't. And it's questionable about the rest. We don't know if they paid it. We don't know if they got it back. We can't collect data on it. But 2/3 are paying the ransom and getting their data back. That seems very good, but a third, as much as a third, may not. Now, of course, you could choose not to pay the ransom and risk going out of business, because the statistics still say that a business that loses its data goes out of business within 60 days. And more often than not, that's kind of scary. The other choice, and this is where we start to pivot, is to restore your data from backup. So let's pivot now and explore that. Let's pivot now and ask, what's the solution? How do we deal with ransomware? How do we deal with it? And the popular assumption is that we provide protection and prevention like anything else. We build a wall. We have the cyber criminals pay for it. No, it's not going to be like that. And the fact is that there are preventative and protective steps we can take. But, well, let's look at them. Comprehensive training. This is the first thing everybody talks about when they're talking about ransomware. Let's train the users to better recognize phishing emails. The fact is that you could provide as much training as possible, but there are still people who are so adept at creating a genuine-looking email that nobody would detect it. And so all the training you can do won't prevent all the problem. And in most cases, people take the training, and they're careful for a little while, but then they slip back into their old ways. That, of course, can be somewhat mitigated by providing regular refreshers. So on a monthly basis, you should be pulling everybody together and reminding them of what they need to do to prevent ransomware. On an ongoing basis, there should always be programs to advance awareness amongst your people, that they need to be vigilant. They need to be keeping an eye out for signs that an email just can't possibly be what it says it is. Then there's testing. Now, we talk about the importance of regular penetration testing in the overall as being something you need to do to keep your whole network safe. But it's just as important to be testing your backups. You back up data all the time. Some people still think that's a daily function. It's a perpetual function. It's a constant function. The problem is, and this is going back into antiquity, as far back as I can remember, we were all very happy to know, okay, great, the backup ran. But will it restore? And that got to being somewhat of a joke until it didn't. And so we instituted a process of regularly testing the backups we make so we are sure that they will restore when we need them to. I can't emphasize enough the importance of restoration testing. It's crucial that you're constantly testing your backups to make sure that they do restore. The other thing when it comes to ransomware in particular, I recommend that you take a break and go fishing. And I do not mean sit by the side of a lake. Go fishing. Create your own phishing emails. Have experts come in and create phishing emails for you. Send them to your own people and see how many people fall for them. Make it very uncomfortable for them when they do. Make it very public that you made it very uncomfortable for them when they did, so that everybody knows that if you fall for a phishing email, you're going to be made to feel uncomfortable. It's just that simple. It's really easy to deter people from being less than careful about phishing emails if you're regularly sending out. It's kind of like a secret shopper kind of process. They don't know that it's you, and so they're always careful to make sure that they don't fail, especially when it's you. What they don't realize that it's worse when they fail when it's not you. It's worse when they fail when it is an attacker and the company has to pay millions or billions for the attack. So go fishing. Here's the problem with all of those steps. They all still involve the PEBCAC the godforsaken PEBKEC, the user, the person, that fallible part of the network that is unpredictable. You never know what they're going to do or not do. And so all of these preventative measures are only so effective. They're not completely effective, and they're not consistently effective. So we really do need to go beyond the PEBKEC. We need to go beyond prevention and beyond protection. So here's solution step number one. Solution step number one is to make the attack pointless. Make it completely pointless. Make it so, you know what, it doesn't matter if you corrupt my data or encrypt my data or steal my data. And how do you do that? You start by recognizing that data exists in one of three states at any given time. One state, popular state, is data at rest. The data is in storage, not being used, not doing anything, but it's still extremely vulnerable to attack. So that's a problem. Of course, for the data to be of any use to you, you got to put it into motion, because data only makes money in motion. So you're going to transfer that data from your host to somebody else's host, and therefore it will spend some time in transit from one place to another. And when it gets there, it's very likely that that data will be put to use. So there are three different states of data. What should all three states of data have in common? The data should be encrypted during all of it. Whether it's at rest, in transit, or in use, data must always be kept encrypted. Because when it's kept encrypted, anybody who accesses your data, if they want to steal it, it's useless to them. They don't have your decryption key, and therefore they have gobbledygook. They have scrambled information that is of absolutely no use to them, and therefore you've made it not worth their while. Now, that goes part of the way to making the attack pointless. Of course, if their effort is to keep you from using the data yourself, you still got challenges. So here's solution step number two. Remember we talked before about backing up your data? That's key. You need a fresh, current backup that is as current as it possibly can be, so that there's very little data loss between the last or the most recent backup and the current moment in time. So you then need to be prepared to quickly recover that data and put it back into action. They can encrypt it all they want. You'll put a decrypted version back in place and knock out their encryption. How do you do that? And the answer is the way to do that involves what we call the 3-2-1 rule. Here's three. 3 stands for 3 backups. You want to, at any given moment in time, have 3 full, as close to up-to-date backups as you possibly can have. 3 of them. You need to have them, too, across at least 2 different media, 2 different types of media. Maybe it's disk and offsite. Maybe it's tape and disk. Maybe it's solid-state drive and mechanical drive. I mean, you get to pick and choose the way you want to do it. RAID arrays. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. Pick at least 2 to spread your 3 backups across. And one tells you keep at least 1 copy of that backup off-site, not in the same physical space as the others. There are still services that will come get your backup in a truck and truck it off to some hermetically sealed vault where people can't get at it. Another key is probably that one, the one that's off-site, but at least one of your copies should be recorded to immutable storage. That means that once you've put it there, nothing can change it. It's going to stay the way it is forever. It is a write once kind of situation. You remember worm drives? Write once, read many times? That kind of thing. Totally immutable so that it can't be changed. 3-2-1, 3 copies across at least 2 different media, with at least one of them being kept off-site. The off-site one is not the big one, right? Because it can't be instantly returned. But one of them, at least one of them, should be set up such that you can instantly restore it as quickly as you possibly can to avoid much downtime. Once you've identified that you have been attacked, replace their encrypted version with a decrypted version and lock the door behind you. Make sure they can't get back in the way they got in the first time. And then there's solution step number 3. And this is the one I think where people fall short the most. You're so satisfied and gratified that you've restored your data and you're back up and running. You didn't lose much time and you didn't lose much, if any, business. And you got it on over those nasty, evil, horrible cyber criminals. Feels good, doesn't it? Problem is, there's going to be a next attack. So you have to immediately start preparing for that next attack. How do you do that? For this, we turn to Master Yoda. How do you prepare for the next attack? Obviously, you're going to continue your user training. Preparing for any attack involves doing the best you possibly can to prepare the users as much as you possibly can, knowing in advance that you can't possibly be 100% successful just doing that. So you're going to constantly be refreshing them, constantly be updating them, constantly be coming back to them and reigniting their passion for protecting data, because they're going to become lax. They're going to slip back and into being less than careful unless you're constantly in their face about it. And I'm not kidding about this. Constantly. It's your data at stake. It's worth the investment of time and effort to be constantly getting in your people's face, reminding them that protecting our data is everybody's responsibility. You want to make sure from your perspective that you're constantly doing your testing. Yes, you're penetration testing the network. Yes, you're testing the backups to make sure that they will restore. And yes, you're testing the users by going phishing yourself and sending your own users your own phishing emails to see if they fall for them. And then, of course, publicly punishing them when they do. So everybody knows this is not something you want to do, because you're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be brought out in front of your colleagues and pointed at and shown, this fool fell for the phishing email. That's an ugly, 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 ugly thing. You're going to want to make sure that you're always providing multiple layers of network defense so that people who shouldn't have access to your network don't get access, because that makes it all too easy for them to get at your data. Most particularly, you want to make sure that you provide strong endpoint protection, because that's where most people get into your network to get at your data. The endpoints are literally the doorways into your network. You have to protect them more than you protect anything. You're probably going to want to consider implementing zero trust across your network, and make everything prove that it is what it says it is or who it says it is every time. Trust nothing and validate everything all the time. You're going to want to employ extended detection and response. I mean, yes, it is possible to see things coming if you're hunting for them, if you're out there looking for them, and if you've given yourself every chance of catching them before they hit. So just because it's not totally effective all by itself doesn't mean you don't do it. Do it. Another thing, and this is so often forgotten, patches and updates come out all the time. And it's crucial to evaluate each patch, determine that, yes, indeed, your system needs it. It will not break anything else if you allow it to be implemented, and practice prompt patching. Here's a nice alliterative sentence. Practice prompt patching. Because the more time you take to patch, the more vulnerable your network is. Also, constant backup. Backup is not a daily occurrence, it's a constant occurrence. And always observe the 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of the data across at least 2 different kinds of media, with at least one copy being kept off-site, and at least one copy being recorded immutably, so it can never be changed again. Now, of course, when you're making immutable copies every day, they're going to pile up. So you do have to have a process for cycling them out. And in the case of immutable copies, that means destroying them once they're old enough to not be needed. So you need to establish a cycle for that. It's important to air gap a copy so that it cannot be accessed from the network under any circumstances. And again, it's important for one copy, at least one copy, to be completely immutable, unchangeable. And then finally, perhaps most important of all, Master Yoda, if I wouldn't remind you, he would. Use the Force, Luke. In this case, the Force means to exercise constant vigilance. This is something that's not going away. It's getting more and more prevalent. You have to be more and more vigilant. You have to use your feelings to make sure that you know when ransomware attacks are in process and stop them before they can hit you. That prepares us for the next presentation, in which we're going to talk about in more detail about some of the ways in which you can put these things into practice. But before that, I'm going to ask my friend John to come back on and let me know if there are any questions.
We do have
John?
a few questions for you, Howard. Yes, indeed. We have some questions. I want to remind everyone to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Let's start with this one from Arnie, who's wondering, Howard, are there any anti-ransomware products that actually work?
Okay, I almost always get a product question. Now, for one thing, understand that it's inappropriate for me to promote or suggest or recommend a product at all in any way, shape, or form here at Coffee Talk. I will say that there have been some products released over the years that gauge behavior, user behavior, because again, the user is indeed the core of the problem here, because they're human, because they're unpredictable, because they're inconsistent. Mm-hmm. But when people do things that don't seem normal, so don't seem usual, don't seem in keeping with their usual behavior, you can detect those and suspect them of being possible ransomware in progress. I have yet to either see a product or see reviews of a product that is claimed to be extremely effective in preventing ransomware in that way. Certainly they mitigate, they reduce the vulnerability, but I don't know that they reduce it enough to be warranted. That's really personal taste. But those are the only products that really portend to say they can do the job. The reality is that the best products to protect against ransomware, by and large, are those which will allow you to consistently and continuously back up your data and have it ready at a moment's notice to instantly be returned to service once you've detected that somebody has come in and encrypted your data from the outside. The faster you can get that replaced, the faster you can get back to work, shut the door and lock the door behind you so they can't get back in, and move on.
Okay, here's one from Zeke or Zek. I want to be sure I'm pronouncing that right. Howard, when is it time to call the cops? When does it become time to call law enforcement?
Yeah. If you are a regulated organization, if you are subject to any kind of regulatory requirement, your regulations will instruct you as to what proper reporting is, who you have to report to, the form in which you have to report, and how promptly you must report. And let me tell you from experience with people who have failed, it's not pretty. it can be very costly simply to fail to report. For the rest of us, I think the moment that you realize that you're not going to solve this quickly and easily by yourself is the time to call in law enforcement and see if they can't help you. The stats aren't good. 11% of the time they provide 37% improvement in whatever. It's not a huge dent, but it is a dent. It is an improvement. It's worth it. And also when you go to try to claim against insurance, what have you, for those of you who are using cyber insurance, it becomes easier to do so when you have evidence that you took every step necessary to do the best possible job of recovering that you could.
Okay, here's right on the same lines. Aldemar is wondering, could there be any other reason, other than lack of awareness that would keep individuals from reporting crimes? Things like he mentions intimidation and tactics, etc.
Of course. We're holding your children for ransom. We're going to kill one of them at a time until you. I mean, I don't think anybody's actually going to do that. I don't think anybody's actually going to hold your children for ransom to get at your data. I mean, that happens in movies a lot. But I do think, first of all, it's undeniable that there are people within an organization who may get disgruntled and decide to take vengeance. And one good way to do that is to compromise the function of the business. They could conceivably perform some nefarious feats themselves and, of course, not report them. There are other situations in which somebody in a position of responsibility with high access to data can be compromised due to their own personal habits or foibles or marital indiscretions or whatever you can think of, and somebody may blackmail them. That can happen. And this is a good way. I mean, people in high positions of access to sensitive data are often victimized because they have that access. And so, there are reasons other than pure dumb stupidity.
Hey, here's one from Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Regular attendee. Always glad to get your questions.
Lynn. Good to see you.
In your experience, Howard, what are some of the latest trends and tactics employed by ransomware attackers?
I have to say, I'm tempted to say, hey, Lynn, you should watch the presentation before you ask the questions. That's funny. Nice. I think I covered that to some extent, but I do think you'll get much better answers on that question from our next presenter. And so I will leave that for them.
Awesome. I will ask him when we get there. Let's see. We've got one from, this one's from Keith, who's wondering, Howard, is it as important to back up your data if it's in the cloud where it's replicated many times at different data centers?
Okay, yeah. I'll remind you that the only difference with data that's in the cloud is that the device that the data is backed up on is in somebody else's data center, not yours. That's the only difference. It's still backed up on a device, and devices are fallible. And so backup is important. Now, yes, it is true that especially the major hyperscaler cloud service providers do replicate your data constantly between multiple data centers. So if, God forbid, the one nearest you is completely disabled, it'll be found at another one somewhere else on the planet. And indeed, if multiple data centers on the planet are all compromised, we have bigger problems than continuing business. It's much bigger problems. That notwithstanding, the rule that I keep coming back to is the who gets fired rule. If your data ever is compromised, who's going to lose their job? It's certainly not going to be the cloud provider. More than likely, it's going to be you. So take personal responsibility for the data. Ignore the fact that it's backed up to multiple data centers. take pleasure in the idea that, more than likely you won't ever have to worry about, restoring your data but please silence your phones for the duration of the movie.
Is that mine? I don't
Yeah,
know who that was. Sorry.
So that rule being in effect, I think you're best served to forget about the fact that it's backed up, forget about the fact that it's replicated over multiple data centers, and put in place your own measures to make sure that your data is both backed up and also instantly accessible to restore in case of attack. It's just, and again, I don't care if the data is stored on a hard drive under your desk, in your network closet, in your own data center, or in Microsoft or Amazon or Google's data centers. There is no difference to it. It is not some other form of thing. It is a storage device, and therefore it needs to be backed up.
Joshua is wondering if you have any thoughts on the deep fake Zoom, where apparently $25 million was stolen from the company. Have you heard about that?
Wow. I have not, actually. I've heard of many deep fake exploits, not a particular one on Zoom. I have not. I have heard about it. I do remember reading a headline about it, but I did not read the story. That notwithstanding, deepfake takes advantage of the same exact fallibility. Users, people look at a deepfake and believe it's real, and the rules are very different there. I don't know yet how you train a user to recognize a deepfake. I am sure that within the next few years we'll see some form of tool that enables you to do that. But I have yet to see that. So I apologize for not having a good answer for you, Josh. But deepfakes are something else that we're going to have to attack differently in the future.
The brave new world. Okay, that's all the time we have for questions for Howard.